Welcome everyone to our fall fireside chat with James Christensen and Tisha Marie Pelletier. My name is Shayna Rosen, and I'm a member of the Gateway Bank team. I'm also here with my counterpart, Nikki Blaker, who you may see chiming in, helping people mute and unmute and on the technical side of things. We're also happy to have you here with us today to talk about the economy, banking and lending, branding and networking, and more. First up, we're going to have James Christensen, who is the president and CEO of Gateway Bank, and he'll share an economic update and answer some of the questions that you all submitted when you were RSVPing for the event. And then Tisha will be talking about purposeful networking and personal branding for business owners to help us all stand out among the crowd. If you have any questions throughout the event, feel free to share them using the chat feature. If you're on your desktop or laptop, that's going to be at the bottom of your screen. If you are on mobile, you can tap your screen to make the control bar appear and then click chat. We're going to keep everybody muted for the majority of the call, just so everyone can hear. But then we will open it up for questions and conversation towards the end. But if you do have questions in the meantime, feel free to use that chat feature and we'll go ahead and share that with Tisha and James. At the end of the call, we're also going to be raffling off a $100 gift card to Vito's Pizza and Italian Restaurant, which is a Gateway Bank customer that we're proud to support. So be sure to stick around until the end for a chance to win a yummy meal. You must be present to win, though. And finally, one other housekeeping note, we're going to be recording this call and sharing it with you all afterwards. So if you do need to sign off early, be sure to keep an eye out on your email to catch the rest of the conversation at another time, or feel free to share with any colleagues and friends. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce James Christensen. James has worked in the banking industry for over 35 years and served as the president of Gateway Bank, which is the only community bank in Mesa since it was founded in 2007. He's very active in the local community and serves on a number of local boards and committees. And if you know him or if you've met him, you'll also know that he is a fierce advocate for small businesses and people in need. James loves helping people improve their financial health and overall well-being, and that's exactly what he's looking forward to doing for all of us today. So I'll hand it over to you, James.
Great, thank you, Shayna. I also love long walks on the beach and hiking in the mountains. So, and my bio in there. So, yeah, today I am the warm-up act for Tisha. So I will try to get everything rolling here, and I met Tisha a few years ago, and she is one of the coolest people I've ever met and just does an amazing job in really whatever area she's in. So you will really enjoy her comments and her personality. And if you know me really well, you know it's all about being authentic, and she definitely falls into that category. So I'm just going to get started. There's actually, it's kind of like a Law and Order ripped from the headlines as far as what's going on with banking. Usually there's not that many financial issues that are immediately pressing, but right now there's quite a few. I'll start off a little bit about Arizona economy and banking in our state. Fortunately, we're in one of the strongest areas, if not the strongest area in the country right now. So I know for some of the business owners on the phone, I'm sure that you're as busy as you can be, and would probably be busier if it wasn't for supply chain and employment issues as you try to scale up your teams. But one of the really positive pieces of news that I just got a presentation on a couple of days ago was Arizona's regained almost 100% of their jobs from the pandemic. We're about really, truly right about net zero at this point. The only industry in Arizona that's still down is hospitality. But a lot of the other industries are well above where they were prior to the downturn. So that's really strong. In addition, we saw in the second quarter of this year growth in Arizona and employment of about 6.7%. And the only segment that's down are government hires. So very, very small difference there. And our state is actually third in the US for growth on the labor side. The only two states we're running a little bit behind are Utah and Idaho. Home prices are up about 7.5%. We're up about 7.5% in 2020. Tisha and others on the call will know we're up about 20% in 2021, so pretty significant. But really across the US, we've seen the same. The average across the US is about 12%. So it's really double digit nationwide, but we're seeing a little more than that. A couple other notes of comment on the economy locally. Office rents are down. They're down a few percent nationwide, and Phoenix is up just slightly there. There's projected in the US a drop of about 2% for office space in the coming year. And Phoenix is projected to be down just modestly, like a fraction of a percent, so pretty flat. And then you're seeing the largest rent increases. Really, I just mentioned the Idaho and Utah. So your three areas that have seen the biggest increases in rent are Phoenix, Boise, Idaho, and Salt Lake City. So really falls into those areas that we're seeing the largest growth. And then real quick on Arizona banking results. So it's, one thing, whether it's Gateway or any of the other banks in the state, I just want to tell you the banks in Arizona are strong. Asset and deposit growth hit record levels in Arizona. Cash levels are at a record high. As you can see by the wonderful rates that you get on all your deposit accounts here or anywhere else, although we are just a little bit better. Capital is also very strong across the board, much higher than we saw really pretty much any other time in history in Arizona, which is fantastic. So really strong. Probably the big negative in Arizona is that we have the fewest number of charters per capita anywhere in the US. So we're down to, once you pull the two out-of-state holding companies out of charters, which are BNC and Arizona Bank and Trust, we only have 11 charters left in the state. So the good news is that there's a couple more coming to Arizona. And one of the questions I got ahead of time was, what's Gateway's bank what's our relationship with the other community banks? And just real quick, we all know each other. There's so few of us. We all know each other. We get along well. We work together. If there's one that's not in our wheelhouse, we typically know if we get a request or a relationship in where might be a good fit. And so, I was just on a call with all the CEOs in the state about a week ago, and then we had the CEOs of two of the banks that are about ready to open. Both of them are in Scottsdale. One of them is Scottsdale Community Bank. The other one's Gainey Business Bank. Scottsdale is going to open up soon. Gainey will probably be 3 or 4 months after that. But the two CEOs said, this is amazing that I can get on a call with all the CEOs of the community banks in the state, and we just share information, what works, what doesn't work. And that's not the norm across the US. So it's a really cooperative working environment. And really, we are excited to have some more community banks. There's ways we can work together on the loan and deposit side. So really, Arizona economy and the banking update in Arizona, really strong. So very happy. And you should see my notes from, I started trying to put this together initially about a month ago, and I kept throwing it away because the updates were coming out every day. And I was adding to it even this morning. The beige book, which comes through the Federal Reserve, they just put out the 7th beige book this year, and it just got released this morning. And so it's information collected through October 8th across the US, so very current. And what it shows is, across the US, loan demand is flat to modest. And when I'm on a banking call with the ABA, with the bankers across all 50 states, there's only a couple areas in the country that are seeing measurable growth. Everywhere else is pretty much flat to down a little. Just to give you an idea on Gateway, we're, once you pull PPP and all that one-time money aside, our portfolio has grown about 25% this year, which is phenomenal. And really that growth in that 15 to 25% range has been typical of the other 10 community banks in the state. So really strong. We're really blessed to be in Arizona right now. Another thing that came out in the beige book says most districts prices were significantly elevated, which isn't going to surprise anybody too much, with the pressures of the labor shortages and supply chain issues and all of that. The CPI that they just released year over year, September over September, was up 5.4%. So typically the Federal Reserve their two targets are unemployment and inflation. So typically you want their target is to have unemployment below 5% and inflation at 2%. They really don't want it much lower than that or much higher than that. And typically when we're running this hot on inflation significantly above the 2%, typically you'll see them try to slam the brakes on. But they are I think they're waiting to work through the, to see how these labor shortages or, the labor issues and the supply chain issues, if that corrects itself here over the coming year. But at some point, the consensus is we'll see rates start moving up sometime in 2022. The different Fed governors disagree on when that's going to happen. I would assume sometime between June and December next year, we'll start seeing some rate increases, but I think it'll be a slow increase. It won't be like when we came out of the 8, 9, 10 downturn when they started raising 50 basis points at a time. They'll be the minimum. It'll be a quarter each time, and they'll take time to digest that and go slowly. Next thing to come up has been part of the infrastructure bill, and I have received more phone calls, emails, texts about the requirement to report information on gross inflows and outflows for all accounts, originally above $600. And then there's supposedly carve-outs for wages and government payments, but it still hasn't been written yet. It's still in discussions, part of the bill, but hasn't been pulled. The first few calls I took, I was convinced that this would not happen. Now they've raised it from 600 to 10,000, but it's a combination of inflows and outflows. So like on a currency transaction report we have right now, the reason they pulled it up to 10,000 was they're like, well, banks already do reporting of 10,000 in cash or more. We have to report that and fill out a form and send it in. A major difference is that's a one-time event. That's a 10,000 event that happens at one point. This is 10,000 in inflows and outflows over the course of 12 months. And it would come at the end, it'd be a report the bank sent out at the end of the year based on whatever happened. So the discussion is for this to go into place at the beginning of 2022. The ABA is very much, the American Bankers Association is very much against this, as well as pretty much every trade association, all of the state banking associations, the credit union association. This is one of the few times the credit unions and the banks actually agree on something. So we're hopeful that I'll cover some of the concerns on this. One of the satirical headlines I saw a day or two ago, I thought was really good. The satirical headline said, IRS agent busts 7-year-old for getting more than $600 worth of birthday presents. And it really, there's so many things. It's a gross overreach. If this actually occurs, there's a large amount of information that would be created and stored. So there's definitely some data security and privacy concerns. There's also a disconnect between the purpose. The purpose is to raise about $500 billion in taxes, and that's going under the assumption that there's a lot of clients at the bank that are cheating on their taxes, which we strongly, strongly disagree with. And really the focus is, the intent was to go after folks that made more than $400,000 a year. But the way this is written, this would impact pretty much every single small business, and as well as most individuals. So we're hopeful for a change. There's also the amount of paperwork is phenomenal. So when a bank like ours would do, 10 or 15 CTRs, currency transaction reports over 10,000 a year, we would have reports that would be thousands and thousands and thousands of pages long. So there's some discussion over the inability of the IRS to actually manage that information. How does that look? The significant challenges for the banks, the costly and time consuming, and then the cost to the consumer at the end of the day is there's going to be some tax ramifications here, and that's obviously going to impact small business negatively. So across the board, we've seen every banking organization disagree with this, and it has nothing to do with thinking folks shouldn't pay their fair share, and everything to do with security, overreach, all different kinds of issues. Plus, the damage we think could happen with the bank and customer relationship to say, hey, you're giving out all this financial information to the government on my account we didn't have to do before, but if it's implemented, it would be mandatory. So I just wanted to cover that one, not as quick as I tried to, but it really, that I've received more concerns and questions over that than anything I have probably in my career. And really, when it comes to clients, whether they're an independent, a Democrat, Republican, it's been across the board. We don't like this. So I'm hopeful before this is all done that there's been enough written information to our to our Congress folks to say, hey, we really don't think this is a good thing, and here's why. One of the other big changes in banking over the last several years has been, I want to touch on, and I won't pick on credit unions too much, but just a little. So I'm a banker, so I have to just touch a little. Credit unions have acquired over 100 banks in the last 8 years, and it's picking up pretty dramatically. And we're against that for a whole lot of reasons. And, the smaller credit unions that have a very specific niche, Marisol Credit Union has a very specific niche. We used to have the SRP Credit Union right next door to us. They've since sold, but they had a very specific line of business. They were initially really working with the SRP, a lot of the employees, but obviously, you can also pull into that anybody that has SRP as a service. So those that had really specific focus have no issue with, and we don't really, we rarely compete with the credit union. But it's pulling a lot of banks out of that tax-paying status. So right now, the credit union exemption costs about $2 billion a year in lost taxes. So the ABA's fought for years and years to either tax the larger credit unions or to have the smaller community banks figure out a way that we could be tax-free and put that money back in the community and compete on a level playing field. So I've never really thought the latter would happen. If it would, that would be fantastic. We think we're a good steward of our money and the work we do in the community, and would definitely push a fair amount back. So we'll see what happens there, but that is a concern. It's a concern really among those that are watching, what we're collecting in taxes, and the banks, and even some of the smaller credit unions are actually, most of the smaller credit unions are concerned with that as well. Next up is probably the most interesting topic is cryptocurrencies. I don't, if you are unaware, we're to the point right now where 1 in 8 Americans have bought crypto. So it was a significantly higher number than I thought. The average age of a buyer is 38 years old. And it's really, there's very little held at the bottom, the 18-24, and then the 55 and over. Those two groups own about have handled about 6 or 7% of the transactions. The rest of it's all between that 25 and 54, and really split among each of those 3 age groups, those 10-year age groups in between. And really what most people are looking for is long-term appreciation. So as we've seen a lot of volatility in crypto, we really haven't seen people get nervous and leave. We've seen big drops, and then we've seen big increases, and most of the folks are in there for the long hold. And really what originally, well, there's a whole lot of reasons it came out with originally. Bitcoin's actually been around since 2009. And it was formed because people had such a low trust in banking at the time after the downturn. And right now, so there wasn't the trust in banking. Right now, the poll they just did a week or two ago showed that 83% of the people that had bought crypto would like it to be safe kept or run through their bank. And so while we've followed this, we aren't at the very front of it, but there's definitely some tailwinds behind it. There's a big marketing push for crypto. There's definitely a heavier male population buying crypto. So you'll see heavy advertising in sports and esports. So we've got Tom Brady, Seth Curry, the Major League Baseball Empire uniforms, the Miami Heat, soccer clubs are all sponsored by different cryptos. And then we've seen a pretty big crypto job boom. And then the last is we've seen the availability where you're able to hold your crypto in IRAs and 401ks. The tough things here are we've seen, excuse me, some headwinds as far as the regulatory side. They're still kind of learning as they go. And the Federal Reserve has no real formal guidance. And then the other one is the ESG concerns. So we like all these acronyms, which is environmental, social, and governance. And there's really a significant energy user for the crypto, which has been one of the issues. I just led a panel a couple of weeks ago with a bank in Nevada called Genu Bank, and they are trying to figure out the gentleman that bought the bank is a crypto billionaire and has obviously a couple dollars to put into the bank to figure out how to do this. And they're trying to figure out how to merge banking and crypto. So I just bring this up because, people really usually have a strong opinion one way or the other. This is a big enough player in the market right now. I think it's here to stay. We saw Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase say a month or two ago that he thought all crypto was worthless, basically. And there's every bit as much information on the other side that says that's not the case. So I'm not really sure it's going to be a major competitor to banks. I almost look at it like fintech, that it'll be a complementary. So it'll be interesting to see how this merges into banking. Last couple of things I wanted to touch on real quick. Was on fraud. There's always fraud issues, and really what we look a lot at how it affects the Americans over 60. Last year we had 334,000 fraud reports with people that lost $600 million with the group that was reported. And the highest losses come to those that are over 80, are really preyed upon heavily. You might be surprised where the largest losses come from on that. The very largest loss comes from romance scams. That's about $140 billion. And we unfortunately have had a customer or two that's been touched by that. Typically, if we see something, if we see a wire going out, we'll call and say, hey, this is something we've seen. So one of the nice things about dealing with the community bank, you get a little more private touch there where we're watching really close. Next, COVID scams from last year, 104 million from COVID scams, which is disgusting. And then sweepstakes and lottery scams. And those have been around. The Nigerian letters literally have been around since I started in banking in the mid 80s, and were around a long time before that. And it'll be a long time after I retire, they'll still be here. But those sweepstake and lottery scams are still scamming about $70 billion a year, or 70 million a year, or $1 billion a year, which is amazing. And then business impersonator schemes. So just something to be careful of. If anything looks too good to be true, it probably is. Last thing I'll touch on is just in the hiring for us is we've seen in banking and a lot of other industries, the move to remote or hybrid work. So much of, those of you a lot of you bank here at Gateway, and it's all about the feel and the team and the culture. And that's really hard to cultivate if I have a fully remote team. I do have a couple that work hybrid, and I have one that works fully remote. I think she's on the call. She's fantastic, Rachel, is doing credit analysis for us. But this is a concern for us. And one of the surveys that was recently done showed about 83% of potential employees would like to have hybrid work. So obviously this is something that I think will change our workforce permanently. I'm definitely old school in this area. I like the face-to-face. I like the in-person. I like the collaboration, the team building. So we'll kind of see how that develops over the coming years. I had a few questions that came ahead of time. One of them was if we had creative strategies to help those outside the mainstream financial world get into mainstream banking. And I see a couple folks on the call. I see Levon Jackson on here from Meineke, and Levon and Gateway just started working together. And, with that particular time, I spoke to a group of about 20 cohorts and entrepreneurs, and I see Grace on here as well. And just had a chance to talk to them about banking in general, how we do things, what it could look like. One of the tough things in Arizona, I've been in Arizona for about 23 years, but I came from Kansas. And in the Midwest, you just see, at one point we had about 500 community banks in Kansas. In Arizona, when we peaked out, we had 58. So a significantly different market. And this market for the longest time was dominated by Wells Fargo, B of A, and Chase, who are still the three largest players in the market. But thanks to, I see Thomas Barr on here from Local First, we've moved the dial over the last several years. the community and regional banks have definitely taken a much bigger piece of the pie. We still own the smaller percentage, but we're moving at 2 to 3% a year, which is significant. And the tough thing is if you've only had an experience with B of A, Wells, or Chase, a lot of those folks are of the assumption that all banks are the same. Whether I talk to community bank, regional bank, if the way I got treated at B of A is the way I'm going to get treated at Gateway, is the way I'm going to get treated at Desert Credit Union, wherever it happens to be. And that's just not true. And so really it's taken us, we're coming up on our 14th anniversary, which is really hard to believe. And we're getting more name recognition, which is probably why our pipeline's staying so full, and we just have an awesome team. But I really think one of the ways we do that, to get to some of those folks is we speak to a lot of different groups, and we try to get out as often as we can. We try to sit on as many panels as we can, and word of mouth helps spread a little, but really, to continue to reach out to those folks that are non-banked or underbanked is definitely a focus of ours, and one we really enjoy. Last thing, somebody asked outlook on strength of the economy, real estate, jobs, income growth. How this is probably more how I feel about it, I think was how it was worded, but I'm very bullish on Arizona for the coming years. I think the big concerns for us are going to be, like any state, I think education is number one. I think, we need to get more graduate high school, and we need to get more folks that graduate high school, go for a 2 or 4 year degree or some kind of advanced education to stay up with the jobs that are coming in place, and really to continue to build the workforce. Those are the things I think that could slow us down, but I'm very bullish on Arizona for the coming years. So Shana, that's all the prepared comments I had. Sorry I went long, and there you go.
No, you're right on time. Thank you so much, James. I also wanted to remind you about your upcoming podcast and Cahoots presentation to mention. And before you chat about that, if there's any other questions for James, go ahead and put them in the chat of this Zoom call, and we can go ahead and ask him those either right now or towards the end of the call. But James, I know you have an upcoming podcast and a presentation in the next couple of weeks. Wasn't sure if you wanted to mention those as well.
Yeah, so I've got a couple podcasts I'm going to do. I have one I'm actually gonna tape on Saturday morning on a business podcast, and I have another one with Cahoots coming up at the end of November. And we're really looking on that question on how we reach the unbanked and the non-banked, and it's really it's really touching on the basics of what is a bank looking for? How do I get a loan? How do I build that relationship? And we're trying to take, I don't want it to be like Wizard of Oz where we're hiding behind the curtain. I really want it to be, here's what we look for. Here's what's important. Here's how you do that. And truly to me, it's about relationship building. And so we definitely go at it. And more, if you're banking a Gateway, that we bank on a very, very personal level. So, starting from there and building that, I look at it as we invest in people. And, I'm looking at obviously at cash flow as well, but I'm really investing in people. And that's what's still I enjoy 36th year. I still enjoy doing.
Awesome. Thanks, James. And we'll be sending out recaps of those podcasts and presentations on our newsletter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So if you're interested, follow along on there on Gateway Bank's profiles as well. Looks like we had a couple questions come in. James, first question is from Keith Lawson. He says, thoughts on capital gains tax increase, the amount and timing?
Oh, tax question. Keith, you're killing me. So, there's just a lot of negotiation going on right now, Keith, and I don't know if I have an issue on timing. I know that's top of mind for a lot of folks. Right now it's not quite directly related, but really when we start talking inflation among the ABA advisory groups, the American Bankers Association, inflation and taxes and those discussions are definitely at the very, very top, and our concern on any additional taxes. So I don't have any. I wish I could give you some more thoughts on amount and timing, but I don't have that yet.
problem. Thanks, James. Grace asked, the analysis fee, is that across the board or individual banks?
When it comes to small businesses.
Yeah, so we have multiple, we have a whole bunch of different types of accounts. Some are, you're asking on analysis fees, Grace?
Yes, towards small businesses. Is this across the board change, or is this just individual banks that are doing this? Because it's something that's not heard of for small businesses.
Yeah, so there are analysis fees at all. If you have there's an analysis account at all the banks is probably the answer to the question.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some completely non-fee accounts. So there's typically going to be several to shop among, and on the analysis rate, analysis cost at every bank is different as well. Okay. And analysis gets a little complicated because then you also get a credit, and most of this is, I appreciate the question because now I can plug Gateway. Most banks pay an analysis fee of about 0.25% to offset whatever those costs are every month. Gateway pays at 2%, or not. I think it's 1.75% now, and I would say by far the majority of our clients don't get an analysis fee because it offsets. I want to say, we're about a $216 million bank this morning, and I want to say our analysis fees last month were about $1,100. So it's insignificant. So
that's fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you, Grace, for your question. Mm-hmm. James, Rich Adams asks, what can the average citizen do to join the chorus in opposition to the government overreach into individual account activity? What's most effective in your view? So what do you recommend for advocating if they have strong feelings about it?
Yeah, and a lot of the different trade groups will have the information to go into, but if you go look up the American Bankers Association, they will have a link on there of all their literature and everything, and the contact information for our local Congress, for our local representatives to send to. And I just think, I think Sinema, Kelly, everyone needs to hear our concerns, and the more they get, they're going to be like, okay, I'm hearing from every area of our constituency that this is a concern. So I know there's been a big push to contact all the representatives across the U.S. and I so far have not seen folks in favor of this at any level, whether it's $600, $10,000, $100,000, whatever it is. So I'm hopeful that this gets dropped completely out of the bill. But yeah, the more we touch our representatives with the concern, the better. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks for your question, Rich. And the last question I see here for now is from Ace. And he says, James, do you think any tax increases will occur in 2022, or do you think they will try to increase yet this year?
I don't think it will be for 2021, but I think there's definitely a likelihood that 2022 there will be. I hope I'm wrong.
Me too. Thanks, James.
Yep.
Well, if anybody has other questions for James, feel free to continue putting them in the chat, and we can come back to that at the end of the call here. But for now, we'll switch gears and transition to Tisha Marie Pelletier, who is a business mentor. She's been described by her peers as authentic with a touch of badass, which I really enjoy. She's the Chief Experience Officer of Tisha Marie Enterprises, the founder of a local group called Social Connect Phoenix, and her newest venture that she founded is for realtors called Property with Personality. And through all of those, she empowers entrepreneurs to build their personal brand, take their vision, and make it happen, make it a reality. I'm personally excited to hear her tips on how to stand out and connect with like-minded people, and I'm sure many of you are too. So Tisha, take it away.
Thank you so much, Shana, and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here. James and I actually met through my personal brand. I love to share this story, and I don't think Thomas Barr is on right now, but we actually met at a local first event in 2020. If you remember, James actually came up to me at this local first event and said, hey, I've been watching your videos on LinkedIn. I was doing a convo in my Camry Friday video every single week. And he's like, I've been watching these and I just really like your personality and I just wanted to come say hi. So to me, that is personal branding in action. That's when people are coming up to you, they're noticing you and they like you for who you are, not necessarily in what you do for a living. And I think that the biggest mistake that I see people make is they feel like their identity is what they do. It's what they do. It's not necessarily who they are. So I like to share a little story of how I even got into personal branding, because let me tell you, it was more about me kicking and screaming because I did not want to do it. So I've been in business since 2004, and I've had several businesses. I started with a marketing company, I had an event management company, and then I was running a mom entrepreneurs group nationally. And I was just feeling like, I don't know if this is really the passion, the purpose that I have anymore. And in 2015, I had a little bit of a crossroads where I didn't know if that's what I wanted to be when I grow up, if I still wanted to pursue those things. And I ended up going to a business coach, and she was telling me, she's like, Tisha, the best thing you can do is stop hiding behind the entities that you have and instead start building your personal brand. And I looked at her and I was like, you are completely insane. I don't want to do this. I'm not comfortable doing this. I don't like being on social media. I don't like these things. I'm more, like James said earlier, I'm more of a people face-to-face kind of person. So having to put my brand out there very publicly and promote that was really hard for me. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we feel that way. We don't want to come across as braggy or self-promotion. We just don't. And so it took me about 4 months to get behind this idea of hers that if you're building a personal brand, it really is about who you are, and all of the products and programs and services are what you do, but everything you do stems from who you are. What's your identity? Who do you want to be? How do you want the world to perceive you? And I love that idea because it meant that this was the top of the umbrella, and depending on circumstances like COVID, of course, a lot of us have had to pivot. So we can't say that things we did prior to COVID, we're still doing now. I know for me, I've had to completely shift gears, change direction, and so forth because of circumstances that were given. So in that regard, I was like, all right, let's start building this personal brand. And the one thing I like to say is personal branding is not something that just happens overnight. It's not like I built this business and it's a success story. It's time investing in you, but it is the best investment that you will make in yourself, because it's attracting the right people to you as well. So I started going on this personal branding journey. LinkedIn is a place that I'm always on. That's actually how James and I met, is right off LinkedIn, because I think that as a business owner, it is a place where it's no longer this resume. Let me just, it's not a career job posting site anymore. It really is where entrepreneurs are going to build their brand, to establish their voice, establish their credibility, and attracting the right types of opportunities and the right type of people in their corner. So, like I said, I'm a love-hate relationship with social media. Decided LinkedIn was my place, and I started posting on there more frequently. Starting in 2018, I started to get more involved in that. And as I was going, I started to think about personal branding as this process. And one mistake that I see people making on personal branding is that they just want to go on social media without any rhyme or reason. There's no strategy. Like I know Shana mentioned she does content strategy, but there was no strategy. They just wanted to post anything and hopefully it sticks. It's just that whole marketing ploy of I'm just going to throw things at the wall and hopefully somebody will bite. Right? And that's not what we're doing here. We really want to be strategic in how we're positioning ourselves, because it's our brand and it's our reputation. So I started thinking about what are some easy ways to start building a brand, and having to go through this process myself, which was super challenging. I started thinking about this process, and I created the 7 P's of building your personal brand. And I dropped I think Shana or Nikki will drop it in the chat, but I created the guide to personal branding, and it's just a free guide that I put together of some exercises that you can do to build your personal brand. So when we talk about the 7 P's, I like to say the first thing we want to start with is, what is your purpose? Like, why do you get up in the morning? What lights your soul on fire? So think about, what is your purpose in everything that you do? James mentioned, authenticity. Shana mentioned that also. And when we start thinking about our purpose, why do you do the things that you do? For me, I know my purpose is always to be contributing, to giving back, to helping others succeed. That is like why I get up in the morning. So think about, what is that purpose for you? Then the second P we get into is your pillars. So your pillars, another word for that is core values. Core values. Your pillars, what do you stand on? What are those pillars that you stand on? For me, big things for me Integrity. So you have to be doing the right thing, of course. Integrity, authenticity is huge for me. Energy, enthusiasm, those are things that I gravitate toward. So in talking to who are you trying to attract, core values or your pillars are really what is going to attract the right people to you, because everything you do is going to stem from that place of what are your pillars? What are your core values? So if James, for instance, like I love authentic people, well, James and I are naturally going to click because I also value that too. All right. So second one was pillars. The third one is what are your passions? And here's another mistake I see people making when it comes to personal branding is they always just want to talk about their business. You can get on social media, for instance, and everyone's like, this is what I do in business. Here's some tips for business. Here's business. Here's business. But I will tell you that more people are interested to see if you're a human and what are your passions, because conversations start around what you're passionate about. Just before this call, I said, I've got 2 kids, I've got 3 dogs. I'm hoping the dogs aren't going to make a fuss. I have a boxer, I have 2 pugs. And every time I start with, oh yeah, I've got pugs, they're like, oh my gosh, I have pugs. I love pugs. Like it's a great conversation starter. But if I'm just like, here's a business tip, here's a business tip, here's a business tip, don't you kind of get bored of that? Don't you want to see that I have life outside of business? I have other interests outside of business. I was doing a course one day and I asked a realtor, in fact, I said, your last transactions, where did they come from? And she had to think about it. And she said, you know what? The gym, my Zumba class. The women in my Zumba class knew I was a realtor, knew I loved Zumba, knew we got along already. And that's why they came to me. So it had nothing to do with what she did for a living. It had everything to do with that she had a lot of the same interests. She had a lot of the same core values that they had. Health was important to them. So leading with what you do is, to me, a detriment. You should be leading with who you are, what you stand for, what lights you up. All right. The next one is your personality. What's your personality like? Obviously you guys see, like I'm just talking a lot with my hands. I have this high energy. I've been told I have an infectious energy, and that it's what draws people. But it doesn't mean that you also have to have that same high energy. But what does your personality say about you? Because your personality is going to show whether you're online, it's going to show offline when you're meeting someone individually. Like James and I had a great conversation just before this of you meet someone in a networking group, for instance, but it's so key to meet that person one-on-one so you can see what their personality is like and if you vibe. So what does your personality say? The next P we get into is people and prospects. I'm going to say this. I am more about quality versus the quantity. I don't need everybody to like me. I don't need everybody to work with me. I'm really set on who do I want to attract, that we have those same core values, those same principles. We work really well together and they are the ideal client. They are the ideal person I want to do business with, that I want in my life. So think about the people that you really, really want to serve, the people that want to work with you. Think back to who is your ideal person that you could work with that person over and over and over again because you just gel. And then our 6P is products and programs. So now we're talking about, are you service-based business or do you have products that you're serving? And how are those going to support the people that you want to work with? And the last one is presence. And presence is how are you going to take who you are, what you stand for, and how are you going to let that light shine out in the world? Are you going to do that through video? Are you going to be doing that through blogs and writing because that's more your passion or your style? Are you going to be doing that on social media? Are you going to be doing that in presentations? How are you going to let people know about who you are and what you stand for? So when we talk about personal branding, I wanted to tie it back into purposeful networking, because a lot of this is going to help you. When people come to me often about branding, I work with a lot of solopreneurs, a lot of realtors, because I feel like realtors especially, you meet them at a networking event and the first thing out of their mouth is, I'm a realtor. And I'm like, great, you and 90,000 other people in this world are real. Just in Arizona, not even in this world, 90,000. And I could say, well, I am also a realtor. So riddle me that. So, when people say that, here's a really great question back. So if someone comes up to me, like James comes up to me, for instance, and says, I'm a banker. And I'm like, great, James. Why are you a banker? Tell me, why do you do the things that you do? What got you into this? So now you're asking more open-ended questions to be able to start a conversation. I find that when we get into different networking events, if James comes to me and says, I'm a banker, and I'm like, great, I already have a bank, James, so I really don't need you. I'm going to go talk to Nikki over here. Did I leave that opportunity on the table? Could I have started a conversation with James and, gotten a little deeper? I think a lot of us make that assumption that I don't need that person, but you don't know that James has a whole network behind him too. And if you got to know that person, that could lead to other opportunities. I think we're so just surface level when we network, and it's more about purposeful networking. So James had mentioned, and I think Shayna just in my bio, that I started this event. It's called Social Connect Phoenix. Thomas Barr was actually one of my panelists in January before it shut down because of COVID, January 2020. And I did this because I realized that in my branding, I love to be around other authentic people. I was tired of going to different networking events. And if you guys have been to these events, I'd love to see a show of hands, where it's all about the business card passing, and it's all about, I need to get a card in every single person's hand. And I remember going to an event and a woman was walking out and she's like, are you leaving? And I said, yes. She's like, take a card. And I said, for what? And she's like, just take one. Everybody gets a card. And I said, oh, I was so frustrated. I was like, there's gotta be a better way to this whole networking chaos. I could tell you some networking horror stories of events I've gone to where I wasn't treated like a person. I was treated like a quota. I was treated like their next sale. I was treated like the victim. Shayna mentioned that she's pregnant. Shayna, this is a great story for you. I went into a networking event when I was pregnant with my son, Caleb, who's now 13. And every insurance agent, every financial planner, everyone came to me like I had a target on my head that said, I need 529 life insurance, or 529 college plans and life insurance plans for my kid. What they failed to do was come to me and ask me about me. How are you? How's the baby? When are you due? Are you feeling okay? Do you want to, it's summer and I'm wearing a muumuu dress and flip-flops because I can't fit in anything. And here everybody is trying to get me to be the sale. Everyone wanted to give me a business card. And I was so disgusted that I walked out, I threw all the cards away, and I didn't do business with any of them. But I like sharing on the flip side that a couple of weeks later, still very much pregnant, I go to another networking event, and a gentleman sitting next to me, Michael, is like, how are you? Like, oh, I see you're having a baby. Is this your first? Like, we're engaging in conversation. And I'm like, yeah, I'll tell you all about this pregnancy of mine. And we exchanged cards. I had my son, August 19th, Caleb, 13 years old now. And a couple of weeks later, I get a box in the mail from Michael. And Michael and I didn't talk about what Michael did. We just talked about how I was and, how I was feeling and so forth. And in the box, it was a little blue bear that said, congrats on the newest addition to your family. Love, Michael, with a card. Guess what Michael did for a living? Financial planner. Financial planner. I went with Michael because Michael treated me like a person. We get into networking and it's all about how many people can I talk to, but you're not having meaningful conversations with any of these people. It's like, I've got 2 minutes. Tell me. All right, we're done. Next, 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 next. So I challenge people to be more purposeful in their networking, because that is what's going to stick. That's how you're going to stand out. That's what's going to make you memorable. The best compliment that I ever get is, Tisha, I see you on social media and you're awesome. You're authentic. You're fun. You're this. I meet you in person. Oh my gosh, it's epic. You're the same exact person. And I was like, shouldn't it be that way every single time? Shouldn't you always get that same experience every single time? Best compliment someone can give you is that you're the same person personally, professionally, and publicly. But a lot of us want to put up a facade. We're this way on social media. We're this way when we meet you. We're this way when we deliver service and you've actually become a customer of ours. make it consistent across the board, and that will make you stand out. That will lead to more referrals. That will lead to more people coming to you and you attracting opportunities instead of you having to chase those opportunities. So I talked about Social Connect. So Social Connect, I started in 2018, around the time when I was getting ready to start building this brand of mine, because I hated networking. And I knew that if I created something, it may bring the right types of people my way that also hated networking. They don't like going to events where they feel like they can't talk to people, where there's a 30-second commercial, where they feel uncomfortable, where the people, the not right people are in the room, you know, and I said, I'm going to test my theory. And I created an event. The first one kicked off in April 2018. And I did one thing different than all the other business networking events you see. I didn't allow business cards. I, in fact, said, if you bring your cards, I will shred them. Because I wanted people to not use this business card as just a weapon of just, let me get it in all hands and let me walk away. And people were like, oh my gosh, did you hear what she's doing? Oh my gosh. And there's no pitching. There's no asking people for dates. Like, I have a whole Fight Club set of rules that I have people agree to when they come to this event, because I'm like, I don't want it here. There are hundreds of networking events here in Arizona, and I don't want to be that same person, that same event. I got a lot of slack for it, but in the end, I found the right people. I attracted the right people who also had those same values and those same beliefs, that they didn't want that either. And so Social Connect is an event that I was doing monthly for a while, then it switched to quarterly. And then we took a 19-month hiatus because of COVID. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be coming back until September, my birthday month. And I said, we're bringing it back. Let's test the waters. Let's get this back going. And James stepped up as my annual sponsor. So Gateway Bank is actually one of my sponsors. And I think about James and I and our relationship and how we've connected. And again, it was off of my personal brand. It was about me showing up consistently, doing this, you know, making sure that I was getting my voice and my presence out there. And it attracted James to come to me at the local first event. We took it offline and had coffee, if you remember, James, the coffee shop. And we've stayed in connection and communication with each other. And now, of course, I'm here today with him. So that's how relationships form. That's how meaningful connections are built. When your personal brand is down to a science, it's seamless, you know exactly who you are. You're not concerned if I have to attract everybody. It's about attracting the right types of people, with the people who have the same values as you, the same interests. Those are the people that you really want to work with. And then you'll see your business start to really flourish, right? So Social Connect, if I can give a plug, is back 2022. I'm so happy that I booked a venue in Chandler. Court Haas is in downtown Chandler, right off Washington. And the first one is January 18th, 2022. It's a simple happy hour from 4 to 6. And again, no business cards required. The one thing that I do is I give everybody a list of who was in the room that night. So, and I really am a stickler of, if you come to this event, you've got 2 hours, I want you to make 2 solid connections, 1 or 2 solid connections with people that you meet. Why? Because it means you were in a meaningful conversation with that person. And then I'm going to challenge you to follow up with them. Because why go to an event if you're going to leave it at the event? Relationships are built outside of that event. The event was really just the teaser to get to know people. Now you can determine, I really want to meet with Shayna. She was awesome. I'm going to go meet with her. And then Shayna and I are going to build our relationship and collaborate and network and refer and all that good stuff. That's how business is built. So yeah, January 18th, I hope you guys save the date for that. It's a quarterly event. It'll always be in downtown Chandler for the next year. James, thanks again for being an annual sponsor of it. And, you know, I love supporting local, and that's what I do. So we dropped the link for the personal brand guide. If you are interested in just going through some of those exercises, I have one from 16 personalities. If you're like, who am I? What do I stand for? This is like a Myers-Briggs test. So you could take that test. And then I recommend looking at the core values exercise worksheet of determining what are your three to four, core values. And then looking at some of those hard-hitting questions of who you are, what's your legacy, what lights you up, who do you serve, like really diving into those 7 Ps to really get clear. Because when we have clarity, things start to, flow a little more seamlessly. So 9:57, Shayna, how about that?
Awesome timing. Thank you so much, Tisha, and great insights. I remember having that same light bulb moment early on in my career when a colleague of mine told me, you don't have to be a different person personally than you are professionally. And having started my career in a corporate environment, I just figured you always had to be very, buttoned up and almost a different version of yourself. And it's been really freeing to be able to feel like you can be yourself and connect with people over that, not just over business. So thank you for all of your tips.
You're welcome.
If anybody has questions for Tisha, feel free to add them to the chat while we wrap up here for a few minutes. Just wanted to thank everyone so much for joining us today. We're going to be sharing out this recording after the call. So if you want to go back and reference anything or share it with your colleagues or friends or family, we would love that. You can also follow us, Gateway Bank, on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tisha is also very active on social media, as she mentioned, and we'll be sharing recaps of this call and other really helpful information and great events coming up